Hello, this is our Findhorn Barrow, episode number 14, and me and my co-host Alex are here with my good friend Indira doing. And today we're going to talk to Indira about her soul singing event that was for fundraising for Cali on Friday that happened just there in Universal Hall, and about the different issues that interlink with it. Hi Indira, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Callum. Thanks, Alex.
Indira, where did you get the inspiration for Friday's event from?
So I've been... the inspiration... I actually got it from you, Callum.
Oh.
You came up with the idea.
Did I?
Initially. You initiated this whole thing. I remember, I guess it would have been a couple of years back when you were living here. And so I've been soul singing, and also every penny that's raised from our soul singing together, which is a community thing that we do now. Every penny goes towards a refugee fund for people in Calais, in northern France. So it is a place that I've been going to for several years, more intensively, around from summer 2017 through to early 2019, and then there was breaks. It's kind of really an expansion on that, what we have already been doing, which is devotional singing, raising money, drop by drop by drop. This is an issue that isn't going away. It continues and it gets worse. Mm. So that is kind of the intention for me behind doing what I do. It's a tiny little thing, but it's a little thing. So, and I feel it's important. And people have been asking me a lot about Calais, what goes on there. And I find it very difficult to talk about when somebody asks me on the runway, maybe with a preconceived idea about how things are, and then wanting me to on the spot fill in the gaps. Yeah. And so I've kind of... I've sort of extricated myself from those sort of situations. But in other situations where there's a really deep, meaningful, interchange, a real curiosity and a listening, then it's something I really love to do, because it just is so close to my heart. There's been requests for a Sunday slot, that I show slides and that I talk about it and and I've never felt ready. And it's been partly my own process also of coming to terms with being in Calais, why I go, how, and not even knowing at the beginning that I was in a process, but I was, and I have been. And being able to find a kind of stillness and a comfort and a peace, I guess, in the pain of that. First of all, really, it's not so much a coming to terms with; it's more a finding a way to be with it. And I felt that until I'm at that point, I can't really talk about it. And so this was an opportunity to have this soul singing fundraiser, was to share some of my experiences there, not with a question and answer situation, which I'm getting closer to, but just to share some experiences, from the photos, the snapshots basically that I took without any intention of ever showing them necessarily, just to offer that as a little way in.
Why was it that you first went to Cali, and what is it that keeps you going back there and keeps you connected to that place?
So I've always worked in the area of social justice, racial justice, with refugee people also in a voluntary capacity. I remember standing in my kitchen, actually, just there one day, and it was like, and I know one can tell stories about these things, this moment, da-da-da, and bang, something happens. Well, it was something like that. It was actually me just standing there and just feeling such an overwhelming sense of fuck. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, we can swear.
We decided that at the beginning of the podcast. We're going to swear, and we said yes. But there hasn't been a lot of swearing on the podcast.
It was just sort of like, I'm going to Calais, and then things just flowed on from there, and I went, gathered lots of donations, filled the car, drove down, and then that was my first experience of being there. Summer 2017. August 2017. Yeah. So the photos that I showed the other night as well, that it was basically the beginning, my first experience, the first year and a half of being there and going there regularly, and not having any idea about anything, actually, about what anything would be like. And people do come for a weekend, and they stay for a week, and then they stay for a month, and then they stay for a year. Because it is that kind of place that draws you in. It's a way of life. It's a way of life for volunteers specifically that are going there.
You said that before in your life, so before you were ever involved in Calais, that you did volunteering around social justice for migrant people, refugee people, and also racial justice. Where did that come from in your life? What got you into that?
I'm from a mixed race background, which has shaped me more than I can say. And I'm still discovering the new ways in which it's shaped me. And that is a German mother, an Indian father, both of whom were, who in their own childhood were refugees during partition and the Second World War, my mother. So moving across lands to safety, basically, and surviving. So I think that's an origin of it's more than a concern and interest. It actually feels like it's part of my whole beingness. Is actually about maybe, I don't know, who knows, but and I'm careful when I use the word healing, because I don't know if it is about healing, but it's certainly about some kind of transmutation, something to do with why am I here? What am I doing? What, in a way, do I have no choice but to do in order to be able to feel that I can live and that I can belong and that I don't pass this on to the next, to my child and, to the children, to the next generations. It feels, I don't actually have the language for it. Mm. So, but it doesn't feel like a head thing. Oh, I must go and do this. Or I must go and do that. It's more like, I find myself living in Berlin and trying to understand who my mother was. But I didn't know that's why I went. It's only afterwards that I kind of realized, that's why I'm here. And experiencing living in Berlin also as a person of colour then in the early 90s, the kind of, racism that I witnessed, and that, and then travelling to India and being drawn back to that land again and again and again over, since I was very young, and travelling on my own always, to understand who I am. Feels it's very intrinsically connected with land, and maybe that is something that of the diaspora, in a way, that there's a need to return, to keep returning, to experience home in some way. There was a point where I felt, and it was also a time where my son was born as well, where there was a massive change, and I needed something to help me understand cognitively what was going on. But this was after Berlin, actually, with my son. He was a tiny baby at the time, back to London, and I studied socioanthropology and development studies and education and gender. So these were master's degrees, and then I did a PhD in the sociology of education, with a specific focus on mixed race women and girls, identity and further education. And at the same time, I was also volunteering at the Refugee Council in London. And one of my master's dissertation was done in Berlin on unaccompanied minor refugee children who'd arrived there.
What kind of standout experiences pop up in your mind when you think of Cali? What kind of people?
What kind of stand out?
Mm.
Mm-hmm. What drew me back there again and again was the experience of openness, willingness, friendship, love. Nobody's left out. Nobody's left behind. Everybody's included. Nothing is too much for anybody, kind of thing. Time gets taken. And in that very tense environment also, where decisions have to be made really fast, and actions have to be enacted very quickly. And still, there's always take care of each other, look after each other. Nobody gets left behind. And I think that's what draws the volunteers back again and again. I think the connections with people is also what drew them back. So yeah, it did. It felt like a homecoming when I went. So I was mainly with the children, doing activities and music with the children. I don't know how sustainable to always be something going one way is, and I don't really believe in that. There was a great swathe of them left at a certain time, but many of them settled, went to live in Manchester, and they would live in the same houses, and some went to live in Glasgow and they would live in the same houses, and in Bristol, because that was kind of the natural next step, and that support, that mutual support was so needed. It was just so intrinsic to what they had experienced. And it was almost like taking that experience and then landing on the moon, kind of coming back. Yeah,
was that sense of like community, togetherness, looking out for each other that they seen there in Cali. Yeah. And the shared experiences as well. Yes.
Those experiences went very deep. And these are, without wanting to be patronising, but they are young people, who in many ways, such a huge learning. But then that thing of leaving Calais is also, I think for many, it was quite final then, It's, once you go back, you're caught again, and it's been, on the mental health level, it's been hard for a lot of people to leave Calais.
There must be emotional goodbyes.
Yeah. And the whole thing of experiencing what goes on there and being in this position of having to make such difficult decisions all the time. Yeah.
With your background, do you feel a resonance, or is it more because you were saying about going back to Berlin, going back to India to discover who you are? But is there something about not feeling like you belong somewhere that's something that allows you, in a way, to feel more resonant with the people in Calais?
Because of the shared experience that I have with them. On some level, I think that's true. On some level, there is a shared experience. But the shared experience is also the shared experience of feeling sorrow and feeling joy and having all those human experiences that we all have. So the experience for me of being a volunteer there is not experiencing myself as being apart from them, but rather finding finding that commonality, that common thread, finding a way to integrate into that experience without adapting, without changing, but just, that this is also part of me and this is also part of everyone, actually. There's one image that keeps flashing in front of me. Many images actually keep flashing, but maybe I can name one or two. The people, we're in the jungle, in a jungle, not the Calais jungle that was destroyed in 2016, but afterwards all the small jungles that spring up everywhere because people need to be somewhere. And then the refugee community kitchen is providing food and people are queuing and they're hungry and they're, and there's this, and then you just start talking with them. They're hungry, they're tired, they're exhausted, they've just been trying to get across the night before, they've been traveling, they've been on lorries, they've been thwarted, whatever it might be, had a run-in with the police, but they're standing there and you meet them eye to eye, and you talk with them or you just meet them eye to eye, and there's just such light in their eyes, there's just such light, such a moment of clarity and recognition that can just pass between you in that moment. And then you laugh or you sing or, you do something like that. And that's maybe what I'm trying to say. The experiences are incredibly different. And the volunteers are all in very different situations and privileged situations, in that they have passports and they have money and can get on a ferry and leave anytime they want. So it's quite, it's complex and very simple on one level as well.
The camps being there in that form and those people being there in that context will be largely symptomatic of like the French nation states approach and then the UK nation states approach and their systems that are in place and which are constantly changing. What do you think about these systems in that context? Should Calais and the camps be there in that form? What's the failings maybe of these systems?
Give me a moment. I can't even begin to talk about that, actually. It's just, I don't subscribe to any of it. It's in my view, it is inhumane. And then we could talk politics, we can talk borders, we can talk about all that. But I don't, and I won't, because I can't. Well, I think I've said it. I don't subscribe to any of it.
And neither do I. And I hope that one day that the world gets past the way that they're doing this just now and recognise everyone's shared humanity.
So when I went recently, the people are now getting on boats. They're not getting in lorries. The reason why they're not getting in lorries now is partly because it's almost impossible to get on one. When you come through Calais, the fences are high and they run for about 3-4 kilometres. This is my observation. I'm sure one can find out exactly how long those fences are, but it's just a fortress that goes on for miles. And so they now are going crossing boats, which is more dangerous, as dangerous, I don't know. It was an experience of being on that ferry, leaving. I've got a passport. I can go, and I did, and so I left. And then I'm on the ferry, and it's full of people who've just coming back from their holidays. This was in August. And, everybody's laughing and joyful and, sharing their food. And somebody offered me also, a family to share some nuts with them. And, it's just kind of like, and I'm just experiencing that. And it's just worlds apart, and trying to find a way to integrate that in me in that moment. And I'm one of them. I'm leaving. I could have been on holiday, and trying to. It's bizarre. Just looking out over the coastline that we're leaving, and I know people, small children, are going to be getting on dangerous inflatable dinghies that night, and they're going to be on this massive sea, right? The channel, when you look down and it's just this massive water. I can't get my head around it.
Purely just because they were born in a different place, in a different situation.
Would you say that your experience as a Calais have highlighted the feeling of privilege that you have?
I become aware of my privilege more and more, yeah. Yeah, every day in some ways. How the world is so separated, so unequal, so unjust, so fucked.
And we live in these bubbles, that there's a certain image presented by the news. Once you get into the UK, you're kind of in a bubble with the media, the borders, you know what I mean? Even the language, because we only read things in English. So we read articles that are written in English, books that are written in English. It creates this kind of, this bubble. Are
we part of that also, though? Is there a bubble also kind of suggests a border in a way? That, we have to cross the Findhorn border and then having to step out of our own, maybe conditioned mindsets. And there's a certain way of doing things here also, I always feel very different when I leave Findhorn. When I go to London, I have a completely different experience.
Yeah, the kind of language that people use, the customs people have, things people do. In relation to Findhorn, what's been your experience of connecting Findhorn as a community to Calais and to soul singing?
I've been, when I was travelling there by car and collecting donations and I put call outs and things, I was overwhelmed by people's generosity. And even like, when I'm saying people asking me in the runway and questions, but I'm saying I can't go there right now. Even that it's an interest and it's a curiosity, and I wanted to be able to really follow through. The NFA offered money to help me to go to take there as well. hundreds of pounds to buy things for the people. And then I started doing the soul singing, so we were doing our own collections for that. Nobody's ever said, I don't want to do that. Why are we doing that?
And what's been the experience of soul singing in particular in Findhorn for you?
I would say it was my experience in Calais that began soul singing here. I was singing with the children initially in the jungle of Pituc and Galsant. Excuse my accent. So knowing what my own personal experience is playing the harmonium and singing with the harmonium, it allows me to feel myself, to be myself, to express myself. I have a voice when I'm playing the harmonium. That's what it feels like to me. It's like it feels like in a way like an extension of me. So I'm really, anytime I feel sad or confused or like that, I know I just need to sit down and sing and things will feel better. And then, so with that kind of awareness, I was, and maybe not even, but on some level, yes, singing with the children in Calais and seeing the effect that it had on them. And the children want to learn to play, so they're learning so we're singing mantras, very simple mantras. And then they're learning to play the mantras as well. And they're keen. They want to learn to play the mantras. And when they see me coming towards them, they start singing the mantra, They don't care about my name. It's just like, Ganesha Sharanam, Sharanam. And so there's that, that it gives the little, the little moment of joy and learning and doing something together and sound, and they call it a machine, and and then there are also moments where the instrument and me singing to them it felt an incredibly, give me another word instead of healing, because healing sounds a bit
restoring or therapeutic.
Therapeutic, maybe, yeah, that it's restorative in some way. That again, this thing of like that the kids might be just sitting around the harmonium and they're quiet, and then they've just been traveling all night, been meeting their smuggler with their family, and then getting on lorry, and then and it's failed, and they've come back, so they've been up all night, they're exhausted. They're sad, they're confused, and they just need to be still for a minute, for a moment, and not be in this throng of the noise of wherever it is that they are, because there's always like so much going on, and they'll just be very quiet, and I'll sing to them like little Sufi mantras that are like lullabies, and they'll listen, and they'll close their eyes, and they'll be still. They'll just be still for a moment, and yeah. So with that experience, then I started singing here in the community with people, just inviting people to come and sing if they wanted to.
I think the first one I went to was in the winter months, and I went to quite a few around that time, and just being there in the sunshine room with all of the candles laid out beautifully and all of the coloured lights you put across the piano, all of the cushions and flowers, and then around 20 or so people there in the circle, different instruments, maracas, shakers, tambourines, guitars, different instruments lying about, bells, you with your harmonium, everyone there just singing, and like there is the mantra songs, and then it is like we're all making that music together. Like I'm someone that really loves music, but I'm not great at any instruments, and I never like make or produce music with anyone really. But to be there, to have that experience together, there were moments when it's like, it's quite easy to get into the flow of each other doing that, because we're all there for the same reason and singing the same things at the same time. And I find there's this experience that we can all feel quite separate, but then when doing something like that, then suddenly it is like almost one mind between the whole group, and there's something about that is very like liberating, that is very freeing, that is very therapeutic. So I think even here in Findhorn, it helps people a lot, those soul singing events.
Yeah, that's nice to hear that from you, to hear that, description, to hear it described. It makes me think also how it's like a very personal experience, and at the same time it's a communal experience. Because sometimes, in the group I'm sort of thinking, I'm having my own experience here, and I get the sense that everyone's having their own experience here. Nobody's walked out yet, so can't be that bad. But it does actually feel like it just creates an incredible energy field, which is one.
And each time it can be so different as well, like maybe more in the winter months where it is very like calm and relaxing, wholesome. Then I remember one that we did this summer here in this room, and everyone was so hyperactive and just really going for it with the instruments, but that was really good in its own way as well.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of the mantras more recently as well have been in settings, and it's not feeling like, I'm composing a mantra or I'm writing a mantra. It's just, I start to sing, but it's so connected with the context that I'm in. So, in the Middle East and different places, usually involving water. The setting that you've just talked about here as well, it's almost like there's a certain energy that's being brought or that exists, and it just finds an expression in that moment when you don't really know why or how even. Or it can be incredibly still. I find it fascinating. I literally never know what's going to happen, and I seldom have a plan.
For the people listening, when and where are your soul singing events?
Tend to be in the Sunshine Room or in my home in Mantra Lounge, which is in East Winds. We have usually been doing them on Fridays, but it could be any day.
What's your connection to the harmonium?
That's it there. It's the same one. I didn't know I was going to buy it. It was like I was on my way from London to Findhorn. I was on my way to the airport, and I found myself just doing a detour quite a big detour to Southall, and bought a harmonium. Didn't even like the sound of it very much at that time. Whenever I'd heard it, it's too dirgy. Don't like it. But then when I had it, it was a completely different experience.
And what's your relationship with Findhorn? How did you first get involved in Findhorn? What brought you here?
I grew up on this land. I grew up near Fraserburgh. So there is something about the connection with the land. I always thought I would come and live in Scotland. It was about the people. It was about the humour. It was about the language that I grew up with, the language that I took on in order to be able to fit in here, as well. Because if I hadn't, I would have had a terrible time where I grew up as a brown person. And English people there had a really hard time. And only much later do I then realise, that's why I needed to come back. Yeah, it's the same like this thing going, travelling in Asia and India and Germany. And that's the land of my ancestors. And I need to somehow feel that, touch base with that, understand it, transmute it. God knows what happens there. I don't know. But with the Scotland thing, coming back to Scotland, it felt like this is where I was displaced to. This is the land I was put on here, you know. I don't have any roots here at all. I also need to experience and understand and come full circle with that experience to heal, to therapize myself. And that's what happened. That's what happened. Very much so. And there's some bits that are missing still. And I think that's why I'm still here, if I'm going to think about it. There's a part that I really want to be able to heal. And I don't know if I can do it here. And that's your next question.
In Findhorn, what's been your experience of this community in terms of issues of migration and race?
To be honest, I am afraid to talk about that topic. It doesn't feel particularly safe. There are individual conversations that I have with people all the time, where we're getting it, you know, we're really getting it. But as a community-wide thing to start talking about these issues, I have the feeling that it's not something people really want to engage with. Mm-hmm. That grieves me. Aggrieves me. Because it's a huge and important topic, issue. And to pretend that it doesn't exist, or to maybe believe that we're beyond that here in some way, or that it's not an issue, sets Findhorn apart in a way that I don't think it can be. And as a beacon of light for the world, and as a place of education and demonstration that everybody's looking to around the world, I think the issue around its identity is really, really important to look at. You know, who's living here? Why? Is there anything that we can do to begin to take these big issues out from under the carpet and talk about them in an open and transparent way where everyone feels safe?
Do you think the community is approaching the point where that conversation could happen, or is it still, in your opinion, not really getting close to that?
When I hear that question, I feel like I have to step up, and that in some way it's my responsibility, and other people of colour and Black people here, that it's somehow their responsibility. And I don't think it is. So I don't know, actually. I really don't know.
I think if Findhorn does want to be a beacon of light to the world, then as a community, as a place, it really has to face openly and directly the injustices that a lot of people around the world have to face all the time in their lives. Because there is, you know, the aspects of Findhorn in which it recognises the ways in which we're all connected, no matter who we are. But we can't bypass the ways in which some people have more privilege than others, or some people have to go through things that other people don't, just because of where they're born or who they are.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's just even the first step of becoming aware of how it's positioned in relation to others and the world. Where does privilege lie? Where does equality lie? Where does injustice? Where do injustices lie? What do we do about them? Has a lot to do with our conditioning. I'm dealing with it. I'm trying to deal with my own conditioning, you know. I'm trying to undo my learned thoughts and patterns and behavior through talking with others, through talking with people who have different experiences to me that I may know nothing about, you know. I had a conversation just the other night where, you know, it was one of those conversations. And I thank God for them, and they're so important. And I wish there were more of them. And I wish we were talking with each other a lot more about the hidden stuff. And I wish that we could create a culture of safety around that, so that that was even possible, and not that people come here, feel alone and lost, and no one's got their back, and they leave. You know, like that. I don't know. Is that an exaggeration?
Yeah, well, it's more than, as you say, it's more than race. It's about privilege. It's about wealth. It's about all these things. And the community has created this kind of exclusive club in a way. There's been certain financial barriers and so on to be able to purchase properties or to get into programs and things. There's a club, and we're not talking about that in relation to privilege and what that means about who we are and what we say we are in terms of being a global community, when we're really kind of this little club. So I think that after the pandemic, that's kind of broken a few things. I'm hoping that will start to break way for new conversations about some of the shadow sides of the community.
Which comes back to your question to me about, am I experiencing that? And as you put it there, I would say yes. In my conversations, it's happening. It's happening, and maybe in small pockets it's happening. Yes. Yeah, I'd agree. And, you know, to get away from the assumptions. I mean, that's the bottom line, really, the assumptions that we have about this, that, and the next thing. And then the conversations that just kind of help us to strengthen that assumption, to break through that barrier, constantly break through that barrier.
And one of the things I hear more commonly is like they're not spiritual enough, or their spiritual tradition isn't Findhorn, or that sort of thing. There's a bit of a, you know, well, have you talked to them about what their spiritual tradition is, their background, wherever they come from and stuff, rather than just making an assumption that they need to fit into whatever Findhorn spirituality is. So I think it gets coaxed in a kind of language that makes it sound like we're helping people, but actually, are we helping people, or are we actually disregarding their culture?
I want to say something to that, but there's going to be a pause. So one of the things that I was kind of like, as I said, I don't know how safe I am to say things. But one of the things that you've just brought up, and now I feel more safe to say it, is that on some level there does seem to be, if we're talking about identity or material things in some way, that is not spiritual. And that we are actually, that we, whoever we is, you know, that we're beyond and above that, because we're concerned with the ascendancy of identity in some way. You know, we're above all that. You know, we don't have those issues here, because we see everyone as the same, right? So, and on one level, yes, but on another level, it's a complete denial of the experiences of people who have different experiences to whatever the norm, mainstream, assumptive ones might be. So is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, we say, okay, we're beyond it, but then by saying we're beyond it, there's a kind of hidden, it's like a hidden thing saying, you've got to fit in with us, and we're disregarding who you are. Is that what you're saying?
That there is a certain way of being, a certain discourse, a certain right way of being that allows you to fit in.
It's a very Western way of thinking, in that the West or European colonizing way of thinking, which is that we have created the standard way that the world works. And it's beyond countries, like the W, whatever, this and that and the other, the WHO and the World Bank. And we've created the world. And now you have to, disregard your own cultures and fit into our global, structure that we are now saying is beyond your culture. But it's really just a kind of extension of the Western culture in a way. And I feel like Findhorn, the community is doing the same sort of thing in a way. It's like we've got our own Western brand of spirituality and we're beyond all of your spirituality. And you need to fit. It's a very similar thing.
In spiritual circles, I've also seen like a addiction to formlessness. So it's all about the formlessness. What is like beyond, or like what is within in terms of that. But it disregards that we find ourselves in a reality of form where like everything is unique, individual and different, including every human being as well. Like that is at least like half of our reality, really. And I have seen like some, like online, I've seen like a white male, straight, upper middle class guru, for instance. I liked a lot of the things he was saying, but then in one part of his discourse, he just suddenly started going into like disregarding other people's experiences. So like to him, it quote unquote like didn't matter if a person was like a woman, if they were gay, if they were like maybe like a black person in America, these sorts of things, because we should be focusing on like how we're all connected. But he's not experienced the things that those groups of people, those people that he's calling out in that way have experienced. And I think if he had experienced more of those kind of things, or if he'd listened to other people, then he wouldn't be saying such things. I think it's good to like recognize and acknowledge the form and the formlessness in life.
Yeah, no, absolutely, exactly that. And it feels like the ultimate in... It's very easy, just connecting with what you've both said. In a way, it's very easy to just, the normative white, Western, middle class, wealthy, whatever it might be, privilege is so normative that it doesn't realize its own dominance, and it doesn't realize its impact. And it's not interested in that, actually, because it's the measure by which, it's the standard by which everyone ought to measure themselves. Yeah, just looking at it through that lens that we've just been talking about, everything just potentially, it needs to be undone. It needs to be thoroughly deconstructed and looked at from another lens. And when you look at it from another lens, everything looks totally different. If you look at something through a gendered lens, through a race lens, through an disability lens, everything looks utterly different.
I was interested that you said it's so normative that it's become dominant, because it's actually the other way around. It's become so, it's so dominant that it has become normative. Yeah. But it's like that's the way we think. Oh, that's normative because it's so dominative. But it's actually the other way around. But because we've got so used to that's what normal is. Yeah,
it is dominant, and it always has been. Going back hundreds and hundreds of years in this part, in the global north. That's how hegemony works, right? You don't even realize it. So, I think that's one of the difficulties to address these issues here, is that people take things incredibly, understandably, because I do too, personally, right? So if you bring up the topic of whatever it might be, racism, it's immediately, it's a trigger. It's a trigger alert. But it's not a personal thing. It's a cultural thing. It's a deeply, deeply conditioned thing where we're not aware of what we're swimming in, right? And how can we be aware of what we're swimming in unless we make ourselves aware of that, what we're swimming in? So that's like that's the first thing, really. And I think that's why affinity groups are really important, and why, for example, just to come back to the topic of race, and one could talk about heterosexism and all sorts of things, where these caucuses are really important to avoid that blame and shame thing, where people are talking amongst themselves about these issues in a free way, so they can feel free without the anxiety of
In terms of the future, this is our last question, unless Alex has another question. In terms of the future, what makes you most hopeful? What's something that makes you more hopeful than anything else?
The thing that gives me hope are the little conversations that I have with people, what I mentioned before. And even the conversation that we've just had as well, where they're just like these moments of understanding, these little aha moments, the little moments of connection. I'm hopeful in that incrementally things will change. And I hesitate to use the word better. What does better even mean, but I hope incrementally, like through these little conversations. And I'm also aware that the more one thing happens, the more the opposite also happens. So, but it is a big but. I do feel very despairing of what's happening in the world. Greatly despairing. Really, like, that's grown. Like it's grown. That feeling of despair. And I don't know if it's because I'm just seeing it more and it's always been there, or if it really is more despairing. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, you look at the history. If you look back in history and how much horrendous things have happened in history, I don't think things are getting worse. But I also just wonder: is human nature ever going to be good? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of people dominating other people and torture and refugees, and it just seems to go on indefinitely. But maybe one day, who knows, we all come together and stop doing things. But
there was one thought that I had. I like what's been happening in the Middle East, in Israel and Gaza in these last days, in the last weeks. and at the same time as preparing for the soul singing thing. And I've just felt so overwhelmed by it all. And on the other hand, there's also, it's the first time I've experienced where and I don't even know if this is true, but where the media is showing the devastation and the hurt on both on the opposing sides in equal measure. I don't know if that's true, but that gives me a little bit of hope. That's part of the stepping out of the political divides and into we're all suffering.
Yeah. And
that's what we don't want. We don't want the suffering, We're all on the same side there. The Palestinians and the Israelis, everybody's dying, right? Let's stop the killing. So it feels like there's an awakening there that people are. So I use the term awakening in a different way, because that to me is awakening, when you become aware of of those things that are happening in the world, and there is a mobilization there. There's an anger. There's a rage. There's grief. There's how can this be happening, and that creates a little, that creates movement. I daren't call it hope, but it's something that seems to, it feels to me just in my small circles, and I have Israeli connections and I have a lot of Arab connections, not so much Palestinian, that people are exhausted with the whole politics, and so not finding the answers there in discussions and debates, not finding the answer in the politics at all. It's not, there's no satisfaction there in any way, so yeah.
Thanks very much, Indira. Thanks very much, Alex. Thanks very much, Callum. This has been our Findhorn Barrow, episode number 14.